Alright, hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. A couple of things before we dive into the chapter proper here. So initially I had planned to do read-throughs or bring back read-throughs this weekend. But honestly, I just don't think I'm mentally in the headspace where I have the energy to commit to doing read-throughs right now. Just with everything that's still going on in the world, everything that's been happening like that, I just can't bring myself to, record a lot of videos and pretend like everything is still normal. For those of you that haven't been paying attention or don't know what's happening, there's been a lot of protests across campuses across the U.S. has now been spreading to Canada as well, where a lot of universities across all the provinces have started to protest the genocide in Palestine as well. And there has been a disproportionate response from both the the leaders, the higher ups, whatever, the board members, presidents for the universities, who have been calling riot police on these protesters who are who are peacefully protesting an active genocide and trying to get these universities to divest from their funding to Israel. And so, all the university higher ups, the presidents, all those guys are trying to spin it as violent protests and things like that to kind of justify the police response. So it's just been really disheartening seeing all of that and seeing how the university's been responding. But yeah, I just want to shout out solidarity again to the student protesters. The kids really are doing all right. They are doing their best to protest and kind of draw attention to these issues. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that before we got into this chapter, especially with Spy Family kind of talking about the importance of education and stuff. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up and talk about that. But yeah, it has been really tough. I'm going to try to get back to read-throughs around June. Hopefully I'll be in a kind of a better headspace then. But yeah, just wanted to kind of get into that before we do into that. So with that said, we'll just be getting around to the normal Shonen Jump stuff this week. I believe Kaiju's on break, so we only have a Spy Family chapter as well as Akane Banashi to cover. But if you do like these videos, if you like this content, like I've said multiple times before, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really does mean a lot to me, especially during these times when my mental health is kind of struggling a little bit. It really does mean a lot to see kind of support and solidarity. So if you'd like to do that, that'd be greatly appreciated. But without further ado, let us dive into it. Spy Family Chapter 98 by Tetsuya Endo, with translation by Casey Lowe and lettering by Irina Mappa. So we have, you're listening to OBC, and now, the daytime news. Parliament seems poised to lower the minimum draft age by 2 years. And you have I can't believe you're here, Henry. Shouldn't you still be at university? And you see Martha talking to Professor Henderson now, I guess. He goes, never address a teacher by their first name. It's there's a personnel shortage due to the war, so they shortened the degree program by half a year. He's like, oh, I guess times are tough everywhere. And you have this war of unification will allow us Obstanians to wipe out the devil spawn of the West once and for all. You hear a click as he turns the radio off. And you have, when radio was first introduced, I believed it would serve to help educate and inform. But all they broadcast lately is inelegant filth intended to stir up anger and hatred. He's like, hee, you haven't changed a bit, have you? I'm glad to see you looking so well. He's like, nor have you, Martha. He's like, what do you mean? Did you fail to notice my new cloak? He's like, you've become a scholar. Well done, Martha. He's kind of fidgeting a little bit. He's like, that's right, and I've even kept your tea party tradition alive, even if I rarely bother to go myself. He's like, is that right? Then let us have a cup after this. And he's like, I'll steep up a pot of my best blend. He's like, we talked and talked. He's like, well, mostly I did. I told him how highly I'd placed in last year's ballet competition, and that a recruiter from the Marlov Ballet Company had come to speak to me afterward. Henry, for his part, shared his fury at having been struck by a physics professor. I had so much fun. It was just like the old days, if only for the briefest of moments. And sure, clang, 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 and you see all the kids rushing out. Jeff, hurry to the shelters, children. I'll not tolerate dawdling just because it's a drill. And you see, as they're sitting in the shelters, you have, did you hear the school in Thuringia got bombed? It's like, our dorm's a tutor in residence? I heard his brother died in the raid. It's like, you know what I heard? They're doing human experimentation on POWs. Jeff, hey Henry, as a teacher, you're exempt from the draft, right? He's like, we're deferred from the draft, not exempt. And I wonder how much longer even that will hold true. It's like, what? Really? It's like, even my own relatives are asking if I became a teacher to dodge the draft. It's like, how could they? It's like they wonder in this era of kill or be killed what value there is in teaching history. They prefer I teach physics so that my efforts might result in at least one bomb being made. It may be that even education is powerless now. Do you have a clang clang? Do you have, oh no, Martha, you have to see this! Do you have the Marlov Ballet was caught in an air raid while performing to support war-torn Unber. 17 members of the troupe were killed, including its principal ballerina, Johanna. Or is it suppose Joanna? I don't know. You see her later, she's kind of like sitting on the coffee table, just like head in her arms as she's crying. And as Henderson walks up, like she goes to him. He's like, I could no longer trust that anything would be there for me forever. And he said, Tom, Martha! Martha, what have you done? I just heard from your homeroom teacher. He's like, what? As Henderson comes and slams his hands down on the table. So you volunteered for the Women's Defense Auxiliary? What were you thinking? It's like, stop it, what's wrong with you? It's like, there's nothing gentlemanly about smacking a table. Joan, ugh. And she looked despondent before she goes, the ballet company, it said on the news that it would disband, and my dream will die with it. It's like, how is that any justification for joining the army? Don't give in to desperation, you could die. It's like, there's no way they'd send the women's... Oh, sorry, that's Martha speaking, I think. There's no way they'd send the Women's Defense Auxiliary anywhere near the front. In truth, I'd hope to sign up for an officer training program, but they don't allow women. It's like, such idiocy! You must reconsider at once. This senseless bloody game they call war, you wish to be a part of that? Have you always been such a fool? It's like, you and your precious ideals. If I don't start fighting back, then I'll lose everything. I've lost my dream, and one day I could lose you too. If I don't fight to protect what little I have left, I'm going to lose it all. This guy, I don't recall asking you to protect me. Listen, you must withdraw from the auxiliary at once. He's like, that's enough. He's like, you're the fool, Henry. You just don't get it. He's like, do as you wish then. And you have, I was the most hard-headed of idealists back then. I still believed that the world would change as long as I heeded my principles. So I dug in to defend something that was worth nothing. Education is at its heart the act of influencing and inspiring others. But like a clown in a farce, I, the man who waxed poetic about the value of education, had failed to refute a single one of Martha's arguments. It wasn't education that was powerless. I was powerless. And you hear, I'll lend your strength to the battlefront. Donate blood today. It's like, ooh, did you pick out your dress for the graduation party? It's like, oh man, I'm starved. It's like, is there even going to be a party? It's like, I wonder if it's true that they're sending everyone with bad grades to join the infantry. Did you have something the matter, Mr. Henderson? You're looking grim today. It's like, it seems my cousin has been killed in a naval battle over the southern islands. It's like, is that right? It's like, there, but for the grace of God we go. It's like, you're the eldest son in your family, right? You'd be wise to find yourself a wife, and quickly. After all, who knows when it'll be our turn to get dumped on the front lines. It's like, indeed, my parents have been pushing marriage prospects on me for much the same reason. And you see Martha's like outside just like spying on this, or eavesdropping on the conversation. Jeff, ha ha ha, hey, there are worse things, you know. As she walks away, she goes and cries, like, I don't know, I just don't know anymore. What should I do? What do I want to do? I don't want to graduate like this. And Jeff, Shihona, wait! I was wondering if you'd dance with me at the graduation party. It's like, well, of course. I mean, we are staying together after we graduate. Yeah, who knows when it'll be our turn to get dumped on the front lines. It's like, that's right. I can't just assume that he'll always be here. And you see later at like the little like ball, it's like everyone's dressed up in their fancy clothing, like all chatting and stuff. You have Martha kind of like dressed up in like a little military uniform. As Henderson's like, Martha, that uniform. It's like, I borrowed it for the graduation ceremony. Henry, may I have this dance, please? And you see him just like taken aback and shocked by this as they start dancing, and you see that, I assume, oh, he's not a very good dancer. He's like flopping around with his arms like waving everywhere. And Martha's like, you're not a very good dancer, are you? It's like, is dancing not part of being a proper gentleman? It's like, it's just that I'm not terribly coordinated. I've tried to learn hard. I've had lessons. And he's like, how inelegant. Such disrespect towards a faculty member. It's like, just like old times, isn't it, Henry? It's like, forgive me, Martha, you're right. I have been most inelegant. I have failed to respect your feelings. I have dismissed your ideals even as I forced my own upon you. I know such behavior to be among the roots of war, and yet I find myself guilty of it. He's like, heh, you think too much. It's like, and yet that side of you, that's one of the things about you that and she like squeezes his hands like, I've made up my mind. I will make my feelings clear to you before this dance ends. It's like, Henry, it's time. I told you how much what the hell? Oh, how much I've truly come to hear a clang, 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 clang noise interrupting this. Man, I guess thoughts on the chapter, but I really don't know how I feel about it. Because again, this is one of those chapters where I'm like, I want to save thoughts, I feel like, for a video after I've had time to kind of think about it and ruminate on it a little bit. Because I want to kind of have like a nuanced discussion about it, not just have like, you know, thoughts just like rapid firing after I finish the chapter. Because I don't feel like those are like my best critiques or thoughts on a chapter. I guess I'll kind of go through it and kind of like go out like at least a couple of early thoughts on this at least. So we'll start with like the milder stuff before we go on to like the heavier topics. So on the milder end, I do appreciate that this is setting up like a whole, like this is very obviously leading up to like, yes, Martha and Henderson are going to like kind of rekindle their romance in the present day, things like that. So we're going to kind of see like, you know, what led up to the whole thing, like what led them to being distant and all that, yada, 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 to the present day. So I assume that's going to end with them like reconnecting and like starting a romance again. I do wonder if that's going to like pan out to kind of somehow influence your and Lloyd's romance as well. But I think it's kind of too early to tell right now. I feel like this could just be a way to kind of like flesh out the side characters a little bit more. Apart from that, something I don't think I really critiqued or talked about in the last chapter, I feel like I should at least acknowledge in this one, is I don't think we really touch, or even the chapter, or we don't really touch on how this series is kind of presenting class disparities. Because, you know, Henderson's whole thing about, like, you talking about how elegant and everything is, and all of that, like, the whole gentlemanly, the way he carries himself, like, I have to be a gentleman, all that. Apart from that, I think this is something, like, I kind of forget about often, just because, like, it doesn't really come up, or isn't, like, super relevant, except for the times when, like, Becky kind of just, like, goes all out and, like, just shows off, like, how rich she is. And, like, we see things like that. Even then, it's kind of, like, played more for comedy than, like, an actual serious like comment or criticism of classism. But Eden Academy is for like the cream of the crop. Like, you know, it is for the richy riches that attend it, the people with kind of like, you know, social, financial, political power. Like, their children are the ones kind of attending this academy. And I think the thing that this flashback has failed to do so far, especially with Henderson's whole thing about, like, you know, oh, the importance of education, blah, blah, blah. Like, he kind of keeps repeating that line over and over again. It's like, oh, education is important, blah, blah, blah. But he doesn't really touch on why education is important, like how education can be used to empower students, to get them to kind of fight back against, you know, oppressive forces. Especially with, like I mentioned at the top of the video, with what's happening right now in universities across North America, where students are protesting the university's kind of investments in Israel as a settler colonial state, and the fact that it's kind of emboldening the genocide that Israel's carrying out right now. I feel like a lot of this criticism, like a lot of this chapter kind of falls flat in that regard, with Henry kind of being like, you know, talking all moody and being like, oh my god, you know, I'm trying to be so ideal and this and that, but like, you know, the realities of war are kind of like holding me back and things. It kind of falls flat when you think about, like, you know, what Eden is, what it has the capabilities of doing, and especially how it would be helping and supplying the war effort. Because again, the Black Bells were what? Were a weapons manufacturer, right? That's how they made their fortune. And I feel like chapters like this could very easily touch on how universities are complicit in war efforts like this, right? And I don't feel like Endo's like too hesitant to actually kind of dive a little bit deeper into that, which is especially disappointing because we've had more effective chapters talking about kind of the horrors and impacts of war, especially with like all the Lloyd backstories we've gotten. Like we see the impact it has on, you know, children and how it kind of like radicalizes them. And so in that respect, like a lot of this falls kind of flat where you have Henderson trying to be like, oh, you know, education's so important. We need to kind of like, you know, do the best we can to try to like stop this war effort. But he always kind of talks about it in terms of like, oh, you know, what am I doing? What can I do? Like, oh, you know, I can't stop this by myself. Like it kind of boils it down to an individual issue rather than a systemic issue that, you know, one person by themselves can't just change. And so I feel like Endo should have kind of had a little bit more focus on that, with Henderson kind of trying to talk about like, you know, I'm trying to educate my students on like, you know, how they can try to like talk to or influence their parents, who very much would have a horse in the race, so to speak, regarding the war efforts and everything that's going on, how to kind of like influence them and try to get them to divest from the war efforts that they'd be supporting. So in that regard, it's kind of like it falls a little bit flat. Especially with like, you know, we have like the ideological difference where like Martha's like, oh, you know, after she hears about the ballet thing, she's like, oh, you know, I have to kind of like do the war effort as well. Like it just felt like it came a little bit out of left field, like to kind of justify like, you know, how she became like a maid butler bodyguard for the black bells and things, because I assume that's how she got like it just occurred to me, but I assume that's how she got roped into becoming the black bells, like bodyguard, butler, whatever. I assume she had some kind of contact with them through the auxiliary defense force, and that's how she kind of got that position after the war was over. But yeah, like her being like, oh, you know, if I don't start fighting back, then I'll lose everything. It's kind of such a nebulous kind of reaction and feeling, because we haven't spent enough time with Martha for her to feel like the loss, and just like hearing about it through the news and everything, it doesn't feel really personal. Like you don't really kind of feel invested in her kind of like proclaiming like, oh, you know, I have to fight back or else I'm going to lose everything if I don't protect, you know, what I have. Like all that kind of just feels too nebulous to feel really impactful. Like I said, like this is one of those thoughts where I'm like, I want to have more nuanced thoughts on this, but right now, like my brain just can't process it properly. Like I need a little bit more time to kind of like think it through. But yeah, I feel like again, there could be so much more done with this, and I feel like because it's focusing so much on the romance, it's kind of leaving the more impactful issues by the wayside. So yeah, it's a little bit disappointing in that regard. It's definitely kind of the weakest batch of chapters, I think, of Spy Family with regards to like the flashbacks and like the war stuff that Endo's done before. We'll see how the rest of it plays out. With all that said, I'm sorry I went on kind of a little bit of a rant there, but hope you all enjoyed my thoughts on this video. Like I said, if I can find the time or the energy, I'll try to do a more comprehensive video on this. Maybe I'll do like a breakdown of like all the war chapter stuff that Endo's done into like one video. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed my thoughts. Like I mentioned at the beginning, if you do like this content, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Like I mentioned, it really does mean a lot to me. Hopefully read-throughs will be back by June. I'll try to do a Chopper Channel update video, so look out for that. And until next time, this is Ash. I'll talk to you all later.